Hi, this is Jim from Trek World, and this video is going to tell you everything there is to know about the 3-foot model of the Starship Enterprise. How it was lost, how it was found, where has it been, and about everything that you thought you knew about this story was wrong. But now, Robert Hollingsworth was an artist whose most famous work is a sculpted death mask of King Tut, which he then made into holographic reproductions that were sold all over the world and were probably the last widely available Burton & Holmes International product on the market. The original model, missing for decades, well, it was found in a storage unit in 2007. So how does that fit into our story? Actually, quite simply. You see, a funny thing happened to the Enterprise on its way to Robert Able Associates. And that story begins with a request that Paramount made to a company to create a special hologram display for a private cast party celebrating the release of Star Trek: The Motion Picture. No one really remembers exactly who made the request. This company, BHI, would operate a showroom named Odyssey Image Center on Sunset Boulevard to showcase the holographic work that they did as Multiplex employee Joe Belt confirmed in 2015 that the hologram was commissioned as a decoration for the cast party at the opening night of the movie. This all fell into place for me when I stumbled across this picture here. Upon looking at it, it should be fairly clear for you to be able to recognize that it's not really a photograph. It's actually a picture of a hologram. This hologram is from a private collection, and it is unknown to this date as to how many more of these were made, and were they ever used anywhere other than that one cast party on that one night. Now, one of the things you'll notice when staring at this hologram intently enough is that it appears to have lights. Well, they accomplished that magic using reflective tape, the same reflective tape that would puzzle authenticators in early April of 2024 when they examined the model after it had been found and couldn't determine why the reflected tape had been put on the model. The authentication was arranged by heritage auctioneers, and the authenticators involved, among other people, were Doug Drexler, Darren Dockerman, Mike and Denise Sakuda, and Rod Roddenberry. Here, you can actually see the actual film frame from the film that was shot to create the hologram. That frame comes from a 20-second piece of film that Multiplex had sent over to CFI Hollywood to be developed and returned for mastering the hologram. The film that these clips are from is from a copy that was found in storage of reels that belonged to CFI that were never actually returned. There was a major loss at the CFI warehouse years and years ago, and information concerning anything you find that's associated with Multiplex. A lot of the people who are in the know about films basically joke that CFI basically means you can't find it. There's just no documentation out there. One thing that is of interest, though, is that a lot of people believe that the film came from Paramount. It did not. It came from Multiplex. But we'll have more about that in a moment. Now, as I mentioned, the original 20-second clip was unfortunately destroyed by a very well-meaning and well-known slide vendor. And I want to thank that exact same slide vendor, Rex, thank you very much, for providing some of this footage to me at a very reasonable price. The fact of the matter is, folks, unlike every other slide you've ever seen of Star Trek, there are no multiple copies of this. When Rex's slides are gone, there's not likely to ever be any more copies of these to show up anywhere, which makes them, right now, probably the rarest Star Trek film slides ever made. And finally, what you see here now is a 20-second recreation of what that film would have looked like had it not been cut up. The work involved in this was done by Carl Tate, where he took 45 individual slides and interpolated what movement would be needed to get from one slide to the next. I've taken that clip, removed the background so that it can be used as an overlay, and I've also upscaled it to 4K for better clarity. Perhaps, in the near future, someone with skills that are far better than mine or Carl's could actually take those same 45 clips and make a completely distortion-free motion video from them. So now we know that BHI actually had the model and they created the hologram. But this is where things began to go off the rails. The entire existence of BHI was troubled as they were always short of operating funds. This is a condition that would be the final contributing factor in the disappearance of the model. One quote on the internet says, "BHI was always short on cash. Would have gone under long before this if it had not been for people willing to work with little or no pay. Infusions of cash from Mallet and a landlord who rarely asked for rent." The Palmer family of Los Angeles had owned many properties, and the BHI offices were in what was at one time called the Palmer Building on Sunset Strip. The last member of that family, Mrs. Palmer, had been a close friend of Burton Holmes, and for his memory, rarely asked for BHI to pay rent when it was due. BHI always tried to pay the rent, and when money came in, they could put it on the account, but they never really caught up. In recognition of the writing being on the wall, cinematographer Bill Cartwright, aided by two friends, spent days analyzing each and every frame of film that BHI had and cataloging it in an archive for future generations. Later, Cartwright would be quoted to go on and say, "Then in the next 4 years, the Burton Holmes Company and the archives fell off the radar screen. It's now a lost treasure, and there's not a hint of how such an important collection could have been lost. It was too large a collection to be casually disposed of, and no one could actually been so unaware of its money value, even if they didn't realize its historical importance. The real question is, does it still exist? And in what condition? And where?" Now, unfortunately, the catalog that Caldwell produced was produced well before the Enterprise hologram and the associated film had been shot. And then in 1985, the building that housed BHI's Odyssey Image Center got sold. The contents of the entire building were packed up and placed in storage. Those contents included the 3-foot model, which had never been returned to Paramount via Robert Abel's team, as well as literally the entire storefront from the Odyssey Image Center containing their inventory, equipment, window signage, and more. One of the owners of BHI, Robert Hollingsworth, signed the lease on the storage unit in 1985. 4 years later, he was taken from his family way too soon as a result of congestive heart failure. And the secrets contained within 3 storage units in Van Nuys died with him. Then, 2 years later, in 1991, David Ziegler of the UCLA Art Library said that at the time of his death, Robert Hollingsworth had a storage locker at Public Storage in Van Nuys, which contained more than 1,000 slides that he had borrowed back from UCLA, but never returned. The first storage unit was discovered in 2004. Reels were found belonging to BHI. Note that at that time, the Hollingsworth family was approached by someone who said that the model was likely in that storage unit. The Hollingsworths waited for a follow-up communication, but it never came. And as the decades went by, it was once again forgotten. The next storage unit went up for auction by Public Storage due to unpaid bills. Ironic, isn't it? The same problem for BHI 40 years later. It's kind of a miracle, really, I think, that the storage unit didn't go on auction decades before now. Now, opening up that storage unit are 4 photos of the various display units belonging to BHI that were found. They were used to display holograms produced for Star Wars and for McDonald's, amongst others. And the 2 gentlemen from the area, Dustin and Jason, were the buyers of that storage unit. If nothing else but by that feat alone, their names are now forever interwoven as a part to Star Trek history. So Dustin and Jason, welcome to the family. For the record, they also bought that last known storage unit soon afterwards. But that is a story for another day. And as for me, I have my own little private piece of history from my personal collection. This 9-frame film sequence from the original video shot for the hologram, as well as the photo of the label on the box that reads USS Enterprise, Multiplex. And this beautiful professionally mounted slide, courtesy of Rex, who is a well-known provider of slides in Illinois, and that frame shows the exact same instant the hologram featured in the photo that I got from the Multiplex collection. Now, if I only had that hologram. So now let's get up with the fun stuff, like this right over here. They were used to display holograms produced for Star Wars and for McDonald's, amongst others. And the 2 gentlemen from the area, Dustin and Jason, were the buyers of that storage unit. If nothing else but by that feat alone, Their names are now forever interwoven as a part to Star Trek history. So Dustin and Jason, welcome to the family. For the record, they also bought that last known storage unit soon afterwards. But that is a story for another day. So now let's get up with the fun stuff, like this right over here.